Hello and welcome into episode 12 of the Stomp the Bud podcast, Stomp the Bus podcast. I'm your host Mark Harris, along with Colton Dodgson. Colton, how you doing?
Oh, I'm surviving, Mark. I think that's what everybody's doing right now. So,
Feel
uh,
that?
yeah, that's what I'm up to, man.
Yeah, not much has changed at our last call, except for one thing. That would be ASU. I don't want to say firing Herm Edwards because it was worded oddly in the release that they sent out. They said they were relinquishing his duties, but for all intents and purposes, Herm Edwards is fired and he's gone. And um, I'll ask you first, what did you think of learning about the news about that on Sunday?
Um, I didn't ever expect that move to come like mid-season. It almost feels like if he was that close to being fired, it should have just happened at the end of last year.
I
Um,
agree.
I don't know why they even gave him if all it took was losing. Oh, and you should. I mean, I say all it took, but if what it took was losing to Michigan State or Eastern Michigan. I mean, like obviously he had very little wiggle room to begin with. So I don't understand why you don't just make this move at the end of last year. They find themselves in a pretty dire situation. I mean, obviously we'll see. I think we're gonna get a very Shaun Aguano, I think is gonna get a very he's gonna get a fair assessment. He's not gonna
Yeah.
be just because I think the brass at ASU understands the position they're in as well. And to go out and try to pry a top candidate away from a good job, trying to pry somebody like a Jamie Chadwell or somebody like that away from a good situation to come take over a program that is essentially at the mercy of the NCAA's glacial process. I don't think that's really going to work. I think this search is going to be pretty limited. So that sets up well for somebody like Shaun Aguano. If he goes out and they rally the troops and they have some crazy, even close game against Utah. I don't know. Utah's a 14-point favorite right now. ASU typically plays well against top 25 teams at home. Maybe they rally around Shaun Aguano. Who knows? Crazier things have happened, but I think he's going to get a fair shake. And the state of this program right now, the outlook is not great because of that investigation and trying to convince somebody to leave a position to come rebuild a program and rebuild them to what? Like what are they trying to get back to? 7 wins in a bowl berth? Like you know what I'm saying? Like they've been called a sleeping giant for the last 25 years. So it's just a weird situation to be in, and I think that sets up really well for a guy like Shaun Aguano. I mean, you don't typically see interim guys take over, the job permanently. I don't think that's a very common thing. We saw it with Edo, but
Jake Dickert last year with Wazoo.
yeah, I guess it's a little more common in college.
Sometimes.
But
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? It's going to be really interesting. But I just, in terms of answering the question that you asked, I don't understand why they didn't just fire him after last year. That's the confusing part to me.
Yeah. My reaction to that is like I agree with you. He should have been gone last year, but it's better late than never. There's a world in which ASU like wins that game in a less embarrassing way because I think they gave up over like 300 rushing yards. I mean, I was at the game and it was just
Oh,
Eastern Michigan had
you went to the Eastern Michigan game?
yeah.
Okay.
And Eastern Michigan had a push from the jump. And it's like that can't happen against a team that's, better than you.
Yeah,
And
that first drive, it felt like they were in trouble. Like,
it was, oh yeah, you could tell immediately. And Eastern Michigan's not even like they hadn't even been that good of a rushing offense before. So it was just a total lack of preparation, just desire, whatever cliche you want to throw out there. Uh, and I mean, they looked respectable against Oklahoma State the week before. Like Oklahoma State had to work for that win. and it felt like it was easier for Eastern Michigan to beat us than it was for Oklahoma State. And so, better late than never. That's my thought on it, because there is a world in which they just could have pressed forward and fired him after the end of the year. And I would so much rather have the Shaun Aguano 9 games in the Pac-12 play this year than Herm Edwards. And there are already reports of practice. Like,
I was just going to say that. I heard about that this morning too.
Yeah, there were players coming to the media. It's like, oh, we were actually tired after practice today. And like, oh my God.
I saw that people were saying that the pace was the most significant difference between Herm and Aguano.
Right.
So, I mean, at least he's pushing them. At least he's like, I don't know, man.
Bringing a little bit of new energy, at least. And as a fan, that's all you can ask for the rest of the season. Like, in terms of like judging this season by wins and losses, like, it would be great if we got to a bowl game. That would be great, but I just don't. That's going to be tough, especially with these next 3 games. But yeah, so I'm just glad they made the change. And in terms of getting a new candidate, I kind of disagree with you on how much the NCAA punishment will like deter people. Like, that still needs to be seen. And like, the thing is, like, who knows what the NCAA's like power is going to be? I mean, Arizona basketball still hasn't gotten any official punishment for their. I don't even remember what they did, but they're like misdeeds against the NCAA like 4 years ago.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, and so I don't know. And you say the name Jamie Chadwell. Like, I get that ASU isn't like, there's issues, but pretty much I feel like most Group of 5 coaches would come up. It's just so much more money.
Yeah, I guess money talks. That's the biggest.
The thing with Chadwell is like, would he rather just stay in the South or something? Who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't want to. We have coaching lists, and there are a lot of coaches on these coaching lists that are in other like good jobs right now. You see Kalani Sitake getting thrown around. I don't think he's going to end up being the ASU head coach, but it's not like people are throwing around like Lincoln Riley or Cal Whittingham. It's it's people that are realistic options. So, but you mentioned Aguano. I think that Aguano honestly could be the right person for this job. Like, and like by job I mean like official ASU head coach entering next season, because one, he knows all the high school coaches, and that is so important. I recommend everyone listen to the most recent episode of Speak of the Devils. Ralph Amsden is on there, and he kind of explains how just backwards the mentality was with the ASU staff under Herm Edwards in recruiting kids from Arizona, and it showed. And one of the things that there's just better Arizona talent in the high school level than there was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Like, whether it's people moving here, just a higher emphasis on it, just better coaching, whatever it is, there's just better talent. And ASU has signed like so few of those kids. And you don't even need to sign all of them. You can even, if you even get like 5 Arizona kids per class, that's still like is much more than you were getting before. And you're making relationships with the high school coaches, which the previous staff apparently didn't really do that much, which blows my mind. And so
Aguano already has those relationships, having worked in Arizona high school football for as long as he has, or as long as he did, I guess. I think with this recruiting
and sorry, I just want to add this real quick. Go ahead. One thing about Aguano is I didn't know this, but when I moved to Arizona in 2014, haven't been here for super long, but during my time here, Chandler has been the #1 just powerhouse high school. And I kind of always thought it was that way. But apparently, like, it kind of started getting that way once Aguano got there.
And Aguano got there, I want to say in 2010, he was working there. Or 2009, 2010, I think. Because I remember that was the year. I've lived here my whole life. I went to Centennial High School, and they played I remember Centennial played Brett Hundley and Chandler, and
Mm.
Chandler was like huge then. So I would say right around 2009, 2010, which correlates with, I'm just going to look it up to be sure, but that correlates with when Shaun Aguano got there. So, I mean,
Right.
that's definitely something to take note of as well, his ability to build that. And I mean, you cannot overstate how important it is. Yeah, got to Chandler. He was a Chandler assistant coach from 2001 to 2010.
Okay.
Took over as head coach in 2011, and then 2011 to 2018, he was the head coach at Chandler,
Yeah.
and then got the job at ASU in 2019, coaching running backs. And I mean,
Running backs has been our best position.
that's what I'm saying. That's what I was about to say. This might be one of the more like obvious facts to state, but I mean, maybe it's not a coincidence that running back has been the best position group on this roster since Herm Edwards has been here, and that's what Shaun Aguano has been coaching. So that's obviously good. But yeah, you can't overstate the importance of those relationships with those high school coaches around Arizona. Arizona is not a lackluster pipeline for high school football talent at all. So I think the days of ignoring, or I guess not ignoring, but not prioritizing Arizona on the level of a Texas or a California, the recruiting strategy has to sort of be rebuilt. The scope at which you're recruiting has to be rebuilt. And if you're going to rebuild it with Arizona at the center, with Arizona being the focus, Aguano is a very good guy to do that under.
Yeah.
And I think that might not be a bad strategy. Obviously, he's in a position now where he kind of has to go take this job. He's got to be so good that they can't go out. Maybe he's got to force their hand, so to speak.
Yep.
For them to be like, okay, maybe the best.
And that'd be great.
And maybe we go back to our roots. Maybe we rebuild this with a guy like Aguano. And if we attempt to, and if he falls flat on his face, at least maybe it's a year or two. We have some sanctions handed down. We're on the other side of that. If that's something that deters people, who knows the level of impact that has. But I mean, that's the worst case scenario. Maybe Aguano isn't the guy. You let him coach for a few years to get through this. And I mean, you're on the other side. You can launch a full scale sort of search for a coach. But I feel very optimistic about Aguano. Everything that I've heard, his background, everything that I've seen. Obviously, I mentioned I grew up in Arizona, so it's cool to see somebody rise up through the collegiate ranks or not collegiate, but high school ranks and get to that point and have an opportunity like this. So I hope he takes it and he runs with it. And based on everything that I've heard, I think he might.
Yeah, no, like honestly, like I was so happy when I found out the interim coach was Aguano, because like this is actually someone I could see like growing into this role and has the capabilities to grow into this role and actually like take it even further from there.
Right. He's not just like a stopgap guy. He has a chance to win this job.
Yeah. And very family oriented. I mean, he released a whole statement on the ASU athletic department website. I recommend everyone read it. It's on his Twitter page. It's pretty authentic. Like it's very much like him saying, "Hey," like, and he also acknowledged why like so many of the fan base was upset, because he's like, because we care, and that's why there's some people booing at the game on Saturday, because it was a very bad performance. And personally, like, I don't think you should boo college kids, but that's a different discussion. But he's just very family oriented. And another thing that I'm just going to relay what he said on the podcast, because Ralph has been covering him forever and knows him. He basically said like it's very family oriented, but he's also like he doesn't put up with a bunch of shit either. Like whereas Herm Edwards and like Dennis Erickson too, like Herm Edwards and Dennis Erickson are so similar in their tenures at ASU, where you actually you do have some talent at points and you do win some games, but the discipline is just not there at all, and the penalties are all over the place. And You don't know what to expect game to game. Todd Graham, you mostly knew what you expected game to game. It wasn't always good, especially towards the end when the defense was bad. But so I think he's a great interim candidate, and I think that look, if he has let's say he goes 6-3 in the Pac-12 this year, then you're thinking, okay, like maybe we should keep him, you know?
Yeah. No,
And
it's good that he gets. It's good that it's not just like we're elevating Shaun Aguano for the territorial cup and then that's kind of it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's good that Herm was fired early on so he gets a full look. And like I hope he runs with it. I mean, I'm excited to see what happens with Utah on Saturday. Crazier things have happened. You see this all the time where it's like a team just rallies and somehow pulls something off. I don't think they're going to be Utah. I remember 2 episodes ago we were talking about how the Utah game was setting up to be compelling, just kind of assuming that ASU was going to beat Eastern Michigan, and we should not.
And you know what? I don't care that they lost. We were right to assume that they should have beat them. Like nobody was.
No. I'm not blaming us. I'm just saying.
Right.
I would never blame us. We're never wrong. But I'm just saying it's compelling, but it's for a completely different reason now. There's no sort of success-based expectation. It's more what is going to happen with this group? How are they going to look? How are they going to rally around the new coach? How is the coaching staff going to rally around this guy? And I was listening to, I think it was Bickley and Murata. That's the only show I listen to on Arizona sports. But Bickley and Murata were talking about how they were playing the presser, I think, and I heard Aguano talking about how all of his coaches were already in the building at 5:30 in the morning. Like they all beat him there, and they're all like super dialed in and ready to go. And it seems like they've almost been rejuvenated a little bit. Obviously, Herm is like a good guy, I guess, but maybe he was kind of checked out.
Yes. And here's the thing, like I've heard so many people, and Herm is a good guy. Like I'm not like disputing that. Like he is like people swear by Herm. Like he's a great guy. Not disputing any of that. 100% believe it. But when I hear people talking about Herm the last few days, so often that's the first thing that comes up. And you're not like being a college football coach isn't just about being a good guy. Like is Nick Saban the best guy in the world? No. I don't think he's like a terrible person.
Urban Meyer is the best example of that.
Exactly, Urban Meyer.
Like we just talked about him. Yeah.
Art Briles, terrible person, but he knew how to scheme up an offense. Not advocating for Art Briles.
You kind of have to walk that line between like being a good guy and holding your players accountable.
Yes.
And demanding a certain level from them.
And Aguano could do that.
Yeah, and
because Todd Graham is too far on the other side. He's
right. That's exactly what I was thinking today. Was finding a medium between Herm Edwards and Todd Graham might be exactly what we need at this point. I think you went way too far. I think you went with the antithesis of Todd Graham with the Herm Edwards hire. So maybe you dial back that back just a little bit and find a guy that's kind of in the middle. And maybe Aguano's that guy.
And I think, so one more thing I heard about Aguano from Speak of the Devils, and Ralph was saying that Aguano is like going to like prioritize recruiting in these months coming up and try to flip some kids. So hopefully, and here's the other thing, like if Aguano doesn't get the full-time job, he might still be on staff, We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, maybe he'll get an offer to coach like at a Mountain West school or something. I can see that happening too. But I mean, like I think we're both in agreement that he's a perfect interim coach. There is like a real world way you can convince yourself into thinking, oh, I can see how this would work. Yeah, because the thing with college coaches, there's not one way that works in terms of hiring them. There's no magic secret, There are some general guidelines, like don't hire someone who had been out of the college game for 30 years and hadn't coached in 10 years and was your buddy. Like, don't do that. But even then, like, in terms of wins and losses, Herm had a 26-20 record as a coach, which isn't that great, but it's also respectable.
Not terrible,
in
yeah.
some sense.
I mean,
Yeah,
especially when you
exactly.
consider, I mean, coming into this season, 25-18, right?
Right.
As
Yeah.
a coach,
Yeah.
which I mean, he obviously had fallen off, and it was evident after last season. But I think when I heard about this and the Herm era kind of ended or whatever, I just kept thinking about 2020 and like the roster that they had put together in
I
2020
know.
and everything sort of shaping up for that to be the year that it all manifested in the right way and things started to come together. And then like what would that season look like? I started playing the what if game, and you can't do that. It's over. You're never gonna know.
It's hard
But
not to.
yeah, what would that
Look,
season
it's
have to
hard
look
not
like
to.
if they got a normal slate?
Yeah. Well, and I'm just thinking of last year. It's hard not to play the what if game when uh who got drafted? Rashad White got drafted, DJ Davidson,
Chase
Jack Jones,
Lucas,
Chase Lucas
Jack
all got
Jones.
drafted. And then Darian Butler and Curtis Hodges made the 53-man roster right away as uh
Wait, did
unrestricted.
Curtis Hodges make the Commanders?
As far as I know, he made the initial 53-man roster. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know
So
that.
yeah, sometimes tight ends can kind of sneak in because they always want to have three tight ends and maybe he's a good blocker, you know. I
Yeah,
mean he was pretty good last year, but you have those guys make the league. You have other guys sign in practice squad, and then oh by the way, you also have Ricky Pearsall at Florida, Johnny Wilson at Florida State finally learned how to catch.
he was a monster
Yeah,
against
I
I think
know.
it was Louisville, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he was some of the plays that guy was making, it's sad that he's not
Yeah.
doing that for
And
ASU.
Jaden Daniels at LSU, he's still been Jaden, like he still has the flaws of Jaden Daniels, but Jaden Daniels is still like a solid college football quarterback.
He's clutch, man. I
Yeah, he
That
is.
first game against Florida State, him leading them
That's when he
back,
was the best. Yeah.
obviously it was the missed extra point or the extra point was blocked and all that. But that final drive and his ability to lead them back, that's what he used to do with ASU too.
Yeah.
That's kind of his bread and butter is those
Yeah.
clutch.
He's better. He's a weird quarterback because he's like better late in games than he is just like in the second quarter, and he's like doesn't see a wide open guy over the middle of the field or something. You know,
Yeah,
it's like he's kind of like a college football Russell Wilson or something. You
yeah,
know,
no, it's crazy.
um,
Yeah, and I was just thinking because I was thinking about Jaden Daniels and like how he was sort of hyped up as one of those NFL guys a few years back, and he was kind of in that class with like I remember Spencer Rattler was a favorite for like number one overall
yeah,
after what was it like 2019 or whatever. And that dude, what a fall from grace for Spencer Rattler. That's crazy. Who did
yeah.
they
I mean, he's still he's still a starting quarterback. So I mean, you can't like
No, I know,
take
but
so
like
much.
going
Yeah.
from possible number one overall pick
Oh yeah.
to
Yeah.
relative obscurity, like
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he shouldn't have done that Netflix show. He lost a lot of supporters with that. Nobody really likes the guy after that. He's kind of like the
Yeah.
guy from Draft Day where nobody went to the poor guy's birthday party.
Yeah, that was a tough watching that
Yeah,
when it
he's
came
not
out.
the
It
best
was
dude, I don't think. Maybe he's
it well
grown up
and
a little bit. That was in high school. Maybe he's grown up,
yeah,
but that was
yeah,
not a good look.
no. Anyway, enough Spencer Rattler talk.
Yeah, that was kind of
Uh
a detour. My bad.
no, it's cool.
Podcasts
But
are supposed to be concise and to the point.
um yeah, so anyway, we like the Iguano decision. Um I think this game on Saturday, I think there's a lot of Sun Devil fans that weren't going to go to a game until Herm was fired, like just straight up. And so I think it'll be a pretty decent atmosphere, especially since it's pretty easy for Utah fans to get down here too. So that'll play a factor in it too. And maybe that's just what the team needs. They just want to play. And I don't think this year's Utah team is as good as last year's Utah team.
No, I don't think so either. They're they don't have the element of like, oh, we're sort of the come out of nowhere team anymore either. They have the target on their back this year. Obviously, I don't think the roster's as strong
because you lose Lloyd, who's killing it in the NFL, and then Covey.
That's what I was going to say.
Birds.
Yeah, future Hall of Famer Brittany Covey, Eagles punt returner. But even Covey, like you say Covey, and you're like, oh, okay, Brittany Covey, whatever. But his sort of contributions on special teams gave that team an entirely new element. Like,
dude, he was
so good as a punt returner, and that might seem insignificant, but there was so many games where that was sort of the difference, was a Brittany Covey punt return
and a momentum swing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's big. I mean, Cam Rising he's fine, but he's not.
Yeah, he's a good college quarterback, but
he's not a world beater or anything like that. I mean, they're not immortal. Obviously, Florida proved that. Like they're not unbeatable. You can beat them.
And it's gonna be. I want to check the weather real quick for Saturday.
I can promise you this:
it's gonna be 100 degrees as a high. So that means that when it kicks off that night, it'll be like in the 90s. It's still gonna be hot. So
and the nosebleeds are gonna be a party on Saturday. So get ready for that 100%. If you're going to the game.
100%. That's where all the true fans sit.
Yeah, that's where we'll be.
Yeah. So anyway, like the Aguano decision, Herm. I mean, I saw a tweet that described it pretty well from Ralph Russo from the AP. It went along the lines of like Herm Edwards. It seemed like a bad hire at the time. Then it looked a little better, but then it fell off. And in the end, he didn't even do as much as Todd Graham. And it's like, yep, like there were definitely times where it was looking up, and it wasn't like the recruiting ratings didn't lie.
2020 was probably the apex going into like before COVID hit. I feel like 2020 was like the year. Like 2020 was the peak of like I would say like
because 2019 was freshman Jaden. You win the Sun Bowl. You beat Oregon. It's clearly like, okay, we're building. Like, but
and then all of that stalls with the COVID year, and I mean, obviously, you shouldn't recruit.
And then during COVID, you make the wrong decisions. That's
I would say the apex of the Herm Edwards era was probably the end of 2019, early 2020, before March. Everybody was feeling really good. So, I mean, who knows what would have happened before then? Like around that point, I don't think anybody would have called this hire like a failure. I think the downfall was obviously the recruiting violations, all of the coaches leaving as a result,
undisciplined,
the exodus through the transfer portal, the undisciplined the lack of discipline and accountability among players, and then
random no-shows in games. Like the second half in Salt Lake City last year, I wanted 30 for 30 of every minute in that locker room last year, because I want to know did someone like sacrifice an animal? Just I don't know what happened. It was completely different.
Yeah, I think that year that Utah had last season is definitely the year that ASU could have had in 2020. Yep. And even last year they could have had that season. Like it wasn't out of the realm of possibility, but here we are. Everybody leaves, coaches are fired, and now Herm's gone. It's kind of like you have to rebuild a house while it's still on fire. Like that's kind of what it feels like, but
we'll see. It'll be interesting. I want to one more thing before we kind of get into who the possible candidates could be, or really some of the candidates that are being thrown around and reported. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being like unmitigated success and 1 being just complete awful, where would you put the Herm Edwards tenure?
I think if you would have asked me after the 2019 season, I'm telling you it's like right around an 8. I think I was very, very confident going into 2020. With everything that happened and the nature of the collapse, I think the apex felt pretty good. So I can't say like a 1 because of that, but the way The way that it all fell apart though is really, really detrimental, and it's been I would say it's probably around a 4 for me, just with
Yeah, I have
the way that
I
it
have
all crumbled. I think
yeah.
you can't really rate it any higher than that because of all of the variables going.
Where we are. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
All right.
what about
Well,
you, Mark?
yeah, no, I'd give it a 3 out of 10 for the
Oh,
reasons. Yeah.
you didn't want to give it a 4.
So
You wanted to be slightly worse than me. Just give it a 4.
3.5. How's that?
All right, whatever. I'll round up.
Anyway.
Mark said 4
Anyway.
too.
The good thing is, whether there's punishments coming down the line, personally, I think there might be some, but I just don't think it's going to be super detrimental. That's just my personal opinion.
They might have to sit out of a Bad Boys Mower Bowl.
Exactly.
They'll get back into the mediocre bowl scene the next season.
One less trip to El Paso.
Yeah.
But anyway, the Herm Edwards era is done. That's the only good thing about that loss is like it forced Michael Crow's hand, and Ray Anderson, whoever actually made the decision. It's because it might have been Crow, because he spoke with he was quoted in the Republic saying, like, basically giving him a vote of non-confidence the day before, and then he was fired the next day. So
Yeah, and then they had that little powwow on the.
But they do that every. Okay, they did
Do
that.
they do that?
Every
Okay,
game.
I haven't
Yeah.
seen it, but if they do it, I'm like, I don't know.
And people think that he got fired on the field. I don't think that happened.
Oh, I
Like,
don't think that happened. I was just sort of like,
yeah.
it was interesting. I mean, even if they do
It's
it,
a great video.
Yeah, even if they do something like that after every game, I wonder what that specific conversation was like.
Well, yeah, no, you could just tell by the body language it was like more tense than usual. So
yeah.
Anyway, less of those. Because now there have been so many candidates thrown around. But before we go any further in this conversation, what I want out of a next ASU coach is two things. I want them to be offensive minded. That is number one, because this team, like, the offense was not that effective really ever during the Herm Edwards era, and he would make awful, like, fourth down decisions and kicking, punting decisions and all that, coaching like it's 2002 in the NFL. So offensive, and someone who understands and prioritizes Arizona recruiting. And if you do that, then other recruiting will come, because if you understand, then you'll be able to connect with other kids as well. But not what the last staff did and just try to be like, oh, we're getting California kids, screw you, you know?
Yeah.
So that's who I want. Let's start with the heavy hitters first. Of these three, one of them I know, like, isn't going to happen, and the other two, I think there's maybe like a 10% chance of each, and that would be Urban Meyer, Matt Rule on the Panthers, and then my personal favorite of all the coaches, prime time, Deion Sanders at Jackson State. I don't think Urban's getting hired here. I don't, but I figured just bring him up. Matt Rule, I would love it. You know.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys, you see it all the time. I mean, Nick Saban's obviously the most prominent example, but guys who go up to the NFL and don't make it, come back down and have success, right?
Yeah.
And Matt Rule could definitely be one of those guys. Obviously had a ton of success at Baylor, and when he was hired over from Temple, I mean, Baylor was also in shambles. So
much worse.
Yeah, it's not unfamiliar territory to him. But I also feel like somebody like Matt Rule, although his NFL tenure is not something that a lot of people are going to look at and be blown away by, he's obviously 0-2 and lost, what is it, his last 9 games. Like, he's not really cut out for the NFL, I don't think. But is ASU going to be the team that's able to swoop up Matt Rule? You don't necessarily see
that's the question.
these I think he might be if he's fired from Carolina, and that seems like a pretty strong it seems like that could be pretty likely. Is Arizona State the team that's out in front and able to pique his interest? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But
Because
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Mark?
Oh no, I said I was telling you to keep going.
Oh, okay.
My bad.
I was just gonna say, obviously, he's the guy who's been in this spot before with a program who's that's not necessarily in the midst of something great.
Yeah.
So it's not unfamiliar territory to him, which I think is the most interesting part about Matt Rule. So I mean, if ASU is able to pull it off, that would be great. I just, they're not necessarily the team that you look at and think, oh yeah, they're going to go out and get one of the most prominent names from the coaching cycle,
right?
Because Matt Rule will definitely be that if he's fired, which he probably will be.
Well, and ASU can offer more money than what like we talked about with Jamie Chadwell. ASU can offer substantially more money than Coastal Carolina,
right?
But like the Pac-12, ACC, and Big 12 schools are all in that kind of boat. But then the bigger boat is the Big 10 schools and the SEC schools. And Nebraska is already open, and Auburn is probably going to come open pretty soon.
And I don't think money after the contract Matt Rule signed in Carolina, I don't think money is going to be much of an issue for him. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not going to have
both
to
of
throw
those are also
ton of
better
money at him.
jobs. ASU,
right? I think he's going to want to go to the best situation.
Like
and he's going to have a lot. Yeah, he's going to have a lot of leverage in terms of like picking where he wants to go. There's probably going to be some sort of buyout. His contract was for 6 years. I think he's in his second season?
Third.
In the NFL, third season. So there's probably going to be some sort of buyout in that contract if he's fired. I don't know. Being able
That's true. That is true.
woo him with money is not going to be something. That's why I don't know if this is going to happen, because he's going to have his pick of all of the jobs. I think he's going to be sort of the name in the coaching or in this
if he even gets fired too. If the Panthers don't.
He probably
their two losses have been close. Like I will say that this year, but
but
overall, I don't.
Yeah, I guess, but I don't really see them turning that around anytime soon.
I don't either.
I think this is his last year. Even if he does win a couple games, like, I don't know.
Right.
This might be his last year, and if it is, I think he's going to be he's going to be one of the first names that teams are targeting. Who are looking for a head coach. And because of that, I'm not sure if ASU is positioned to go out and land somebody like Matt Rule. But if they can pull it off, I think it would be an incredible hire. He has the track record of, building these programs. So I would love it. Is it possible? I don't know.
Right. Well, they should definitely try.
Yeah, Mark, they should definitely try.
I will say that Nebraska and Auburn, while I do think they're better jobs, they do have their own sets of challenges that ASU does not have. Like ASU has different challenges than they do. Like Nebraska's challenge is like getting them back over the hump to just being like a respectable team. Like, look, we complain about ASU. ASU went 8-4 last year, and they went like 7-5 the year before that. And Nebraska has just been in the wasteland for the past. I mean, they haven't even gone like 6-6 in the past 5-6 years.
That's a good point. And
Auburn, I mean, they haven't even come open yet, but Auburn, yes, they have high-end potential, and they're in a great recruiting area, but their booster situation is crazy. They're like, they tried to get Harsin fired for like a rumor over this winter. It's like, I could see a lot of coaches turning down like a $2 million difference per year in money to be somewhere else,
Right. Yeah. You want that job security, and you don't want people, like, hey, that's a terrible situation to be in too. And that brings up a good point. And that's something I didn't consider, is maybe for somebody like Rule, who just made the leap to the NFL, didn't work out, he's coming back. maybe he's not super eager to jump out and lead a team. ASU flies a little more under the radar, right? They're not like, one of these prominent programs like in Nebraska, who year after year, everybody's like, Nebraska is
clowning on them recently.
Yeah, and they're always held to such a high standard.
Right.
And the goal is like, when is Nebraska going to get back there? Obviously, Auburn is the same thing, playing in the SEC and everything like that. Maybe Matt Rule wants to take on like more of a low key challenge, maybe. And obviously, his hiring would bring the spotlight, I think, but it's not really that.
It wouldn't bring that big of a spotlight, though. Like, it's
That's
still
what I'm
like
saying. It's
not like that sexy.
No, but a former NFL coach who's had a ton of success at the college level, like, people are gonna want to see what he does. But what I'm saying is, there's not necessarily the inherent expectations that would come with a Nebraska for whatever reason. I don't know why they still have the expectations that they do, but they do. Or like in Auburn, right? You wouldn't have to immediately start to this would be a longer term project, I think, at ASU. And he'd have a little more runway to do it. So hopefully, maybe that's something that they can use in negotiations if it gets to that point. And Matt Rule is somebody that they ultimately decide to try and target. That could be a possible angle that they look at.
Yep. So we'll see. It would be great if we got Matt Rule. The other big fish, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. This is absolutely who I want if we can get him.
Where's he at? Are you looking at like a list, or are these just your
these
names?
three? No, he's not on the list I sent you, which we'll talk about.
Okay, I saw.
But he's just been. I will send you an article, and I think I retweeted on the Stomp the Bus Twitter account. Dan Wetzel, Yahoo Sports, he said Deion Sanders should be the #1 coaching target of all schools, and that ASU should hire him. And his point is like ASU, like he's basically saying ASU could be like a poor man's version of the U, where like you make it fun, you make it like crazy, whatever. You have an energetic offense. You celebrate in the end zone and whatever. And having Coach Prime would be like awesome. I don't know if it'll happen. The thing that gives me hope, though, is he interviewed, and this is in the article, he interviewed for TCU and Arkansas this last hiring cycle. And so that would be interesting. And could you see Deion Sanders at Nebraska? I could not see that. That would just be a weird fit.
Yeah, I agree.
I could see him more at Auburn, but does he want to deal with the boosters? And ASU's boosters are probably a lot more lax than, not probably, they are, compared to those two schools. So that's a factor as well. And he played in the NFL. It's not like money is going to be the only thing that matters to him, and maybe he stays at Jackson State. But yeah, so just wanted to throw Deion in there. That's my #1 choice if we can get him.
That would be awesome. And it seems like he's at least open to entertaining other opportunities. He's not like super like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving Jackson State, that sort of thing. So that's good. And that would be awesome if you could get him. I think like what they tried to do with Herm Edwards is what they could actually do with
Yes.
Yes. So obviously don't try to do any sort of new leadership model or anything like that.
No,
let's go with a standard leadership model. Let's not reinvent the wheel this time around. Obviously that didn't work out. But
let's not brag like crazy before nothing gets done.
Right, exactly. But like what they thought that they were going, what they thought the allure of Herm Sanders was
Herm Edwards. No, I get your point. Yeah.
What they thought the allure of Herm Edwards was going to be is actually going to be the allure of Deion Sanders. Guys are going to want to come and play for somebody like Deion Sanders. And I think we've all seen the videos of his rules for the first day of class and all of that stuff. Like, I think that accountability and that expectation would be set from day one. He freaks out about phones in the locker room, all of that stuff. I think distractions and discipline and all of that stuff would be at the forefront of his mind. I think he'd be a great fit here.
I would love it.
Again, falls into that category of like can it happen? I honestly think Deion Sanders might be a little more possible than Matt Rule.
Yeah.
But we'll
The other
see.
thing
I
with
think, I
Deion,
think it's another great name, and he's
yeah,
already in college football, so it's not like you have to woo him out of retirement or anything like that. He's got the proven track record already at
yep,
Jackson State.
yep,
Just landed the number 2 recruit in the country.
yep,
So
yep.
obviously, recruiting is where it needs to be. And what if you do something like Deion Sanders head coach, Shaun Aguano offensive coordinator?
Oh,
Something
yeah,
like that. That would be
yeah.
pretty cool.
So I want to go through. We have a list here. This is on 247 Sports. Top
Yeah.
candidates to replace Herm. Already talked about Matt Rule. Number 2 guy on this list, Kenny Dillingham. So this, if you would ask me a week ago if I wanted Kenny Dillingham, who's the Oregon offensive coordinator, as ASU head coach, I would have said no. But I've learned a little bit more about him over the past week, and he was on Todd Graham's staff. He was a volunteer GA, and he's a good offensive mind. And apparently, I was listen again. I'll credit Ralph Amson on this. He apparently knows all the Arizona high school coaches really well and has good connections with them. And so, I mean, he kind of fits my mold of good Arizona recruiter and offensive mind. The problem is he doesn't have any coaching experience. But again, maybe that's just not incredibly important to have. There's no one way to do it.
Right. And obviously I'm looking at this little article. He's from here, the old money crowd, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and they're quoting Chris Cartman of Sun Devil Source in the 247 article, just to.
Yeah, that's what Cartman's take. So that could be good with boosters and NIL that Cartman is talking about right here. Kind of a different angle from the, like getting players to come in, what we were just talking about with Deion Sanders, stuff like that. This is more of the like NIL. This is a guy who could help with like boosters and that sort of thing. So that would be good. I mean, I feel like anytime you see Oregon offensive coordinator, you're instantly like, oh yes, Oregon, they're great at offense, that sort of thing. That's sort of been.
He's also recruited at FSU and Auburn too.
Yeah,
so this dude,
Memphis.
yeah,
I see that. And then
he's a quarterback guy too.
He's already coached here under Mike Norvell. So
he's from Arizona.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems like a pretty good fit there too. That would be interesting. I'm sure he would be interviewed if they got to that point. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'd be bad. I agree with you in the sense that I think Matt Rule and Deion Sanders should be like the 2 names that are really emphasized, 1A and 1B. But just from what I'm reading, obviously I don't know a ton about Kenny Dillingham. I'm not watching all 22 for Oregon or anything like that, but just based on the background and what I'm reading, I don't think it seems like a pretty interesting fit. So,
I mean, in the tweet that they have the 247 Sports analyst below saying, "quote If I were hiring, I would look at Kenny Dillingham." So it's like, all right, like all these people know all the recruiting stuff more than Colton and I do, and so sometimes you can just trust these people's opinion. And
but always come to us first.
Exactly. Quarterback guy, that's big. That is absolutely big. Because Todd Graham was a defensive guy. Herm Edwards, defensive guy. Dennis Erickson, I don't even know, but he was just super old when he came here. So whatever. He might as well have been a defensive guy.
I want to see like if ASU is going to be a mediocre, like 7-5, 8-4 sort of team. I want them to start losing games. I want them to start losing games like 49 to 42. You know what I'm saying? Like I want them to be like a Texas Tech of like Cliff Kingsbury or Texas Tech, like something like that. You know what I'm saying?
And and exactly that's my point. Like that's why I want an offensive coach, because either you become a team that goes like 10-2, 9-3 on a more consistent basis, and you're competing for Pac-12 titles or Pac-10 titles. You become kind of just a level above where you are right now. Or if you just kind of stay at the level you are at, the games are going to be at least more exciting. And that matters, especially for the Arizona State fan base, which is like average among all college football fan bases. And some might say that's generous, some might say that, but I'm just saying they're average. It's not the most plugged in. You're in a pro sports market, tons of mediocre football in recent memory. So there hasn't been like a one lightning rod year like 1996 to capture people. And again, that's why you lean into offense, because it puts butts in the seats, and that matters. That helps with recruiting too. And if you have an offensive approach, then guess what? There's so many quarterbacks in the Valley, and there's so many wide receivers and skill guys in the Valley, and there's obviously plenty in California as well. And if you just lean into those positions, you can be good, and then you build on it from there.
I think whoever takes over this job needs to overhaul the recruiting strategy. I think Arizona needs to be the focus. There can't be a strategy predicated around, oh, we're ASU. We're going to get Arizona kids off of that alone. That needs to be. That's not the case
not
anymore.
How it works.
That's not the case. Somebody needs to come in here and make Arizona high school football the focus for recruiting.
And build relationships with coaches.
Right. So when there's these guys coming out like, I think back to the year where N'Keal Harry, Byron Murphy, and Chase Lucas all came out. And I think it was Todd Graham went 2 for 3 on those guys. Got Chase Lucas and N'Keal Harry to come to the ASU. Missed on Byron Murphy.
Take that. Yeah.
That's the type of thing that should be happening. I think back to when we were covering the team and the big Arizona recruits at that time, like Christian Kirk, Connor Murphy.
At least we were in the mix with him.
Christian Kirk. I'm pretty sure ASU was like a top 3 pick for Christian Kirk, right? So getting back to that point where somebody like Kirk, who is now one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL, whether that's warranted or not, you need to be like in the mix with those guys. And at least Todd Graham was. He had
or at least he was at first, and then kind of
and then it kind of fizzled out. But I mean, obviously Texas was also a priority under Todd Graham, but and then it was California under Herm. Those places are important, but prioritizing Arizona high school athletes and then building around that and then developing your strategy from that point on, I think needs to be the focus of the next coach.
Yep. Well, the next coach they have on this list, if we got him, Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, that would be.
See, this is why I'm confused about this list. I don't understand why coaches. Oregon State has been my favorite team of this season. Like, I love watching Oregon State. I may have also won quite a bit of money on Oregon State so far this year, and I'm going to ride that till the wheels fall off. I can promise you that. That's my gambling darling this year is Oregon State. But I don't understand. Jonathan Smith has that program in such a good position right now. I don't understand why he would jump ship to go to a worse situation. You know what I'm saying?
So what I would say is ASU is a program that has a much higher floor than Oregon State. Like, we haven't seen many like 1-11 ASU teams. I mean, we might see one this year. Probably not. We'll probably go. I bet we'll go like 4-8. That's where I'm going. But if you go look on Wikipedia and look at ASU, it's a lot of 6-6, a lot of 5-7, 8-4, which obviously gets frustrating when there's never the peak that we talk about. But there's a few losing seasons in the Erickson era. Todd Graham had one, and Herm hasn't had any, not counting this one. So whereas at Oregon State, yes, Jonathan Smith has it all working right now, but at those types of schools, success like that can be fleeting.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
That's the argument I'm making.
That makes sense, though.
Yeah.
No, that's an interesting perspective, because it's almost like he might leverage the success he's having now to get to a job with a little more stability, which makes sense. You're right. Oregon State has a very low floor, and it's not like that floor has jump significantly, they could have a great year this year, and I think they're going to.
I
That
hope so.
USC game is going to be extremely. I can't wait to watch that game. Hopefully,
Yeah.
what time is it? Do you know what time that game's at? You need to know the schedule off the top of your head for when I ask on the podcast. Hopefully, it's something I can watch on.
I think
Mill.
you'll be able to watch it somewhere on Mill before the game. I think it's a little bit before the game.
I'm excited. I love Oregon State. I think they're offensively
They're really good.
they're
Yeah.
excellent. USC, that's a great over. I think the totals. Never mind. I don't want to say that because I think the total's at like 70.
Yeah.
Which
They
is
adjust.
extremely high.
Yeah.
But hey, if you're feeling a little saucy on Saturday, that might be the one to take.
Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to quickly run through these other guys. Kalani Sitake at BYU. If we got him, that'd be great. I don't think he's going to leave BYU for us, but he's legitimized that program a little more. Like BYU,
he seems like the guy that is like that program. Like he is that program. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So like guys like that don't just leave.
No, but you should make the call.
Yeah.
And then they also have Justin Wilcox from Cal, which Justin Wilcox would be a low risk move by ASU because he's going like 5-7 at Cal. If you can go 5-7 at Cal, you can go 7-5 at ASU. But I don't want a defensive coach. Sorry. Or a coach like Justin Wilcox, who not only is a defensive coach, but also is one that like runs a boring offense. Like we saw Cal against Notre Dame, and they can't move the ball. They scored 20 points against UNLV the week before. I know he's like a solid coach, but he's fine at Cal. I don't. Yeah. So, some other guys that have been. I don't have a list in front of me. I just kind of remember seeing Georgia offensive coordinator Todd Monkin. He's like in his mid 50s, but hey, he's recruited in the South, understands the importance of recruiting to some point, and has a kick-ass offense. He also was a head coach at Southern Miss a few years back and was like decent, so has head coaching experience. Charles Huff, the guy at Marshall who beat Notre Dame 2 weeks ago, I would not mind him at all. There's a guy, Sean Lewis at Kent State, offensive guy. Kent State, like they were like a really bad MAC team, but now they're kind of a MAC team that goes like 7-5. And under him,
they just played somebody kind of tough. I think it was Oklahoma.
They played Oklahoma.
I remember like seeing that game at half, and it was like 17-10 or something. And it's like, Kent State. I remember that.
No, they're like and he won like the first bowl game in Kent State history recently. So like, elevated the program like that, like we're looking for here. So that would be an interesting one. More of a Midwest guy, so it doesn't fit perfectly. We mentioned Jamie Chadwell. I would be totally on board with that. Fun offense.
Fun guy too.
Yep. Yeah. I would love that. There's a guy Brennan Marion. I don't know much about him, but I've seen him suggested by some ASU people. I think he's like the Texas. He's the Texas wide receivers coach, and he got his start.
Brandon Marion.
Brennan.
Oh, Brennan.
Brennan Marion. He coached at ASU, offensive quality control assistant, 2015. He's moved up the list, up the ranks. He was offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Howard, wide receivers coach at Pittsburgh. And there's just a lot of good buzz about him. Like, he developed his own offense called the Go-Go offense, quote, which incorporates principles of an old school triple option offenses with modern spread concepts. That sounds fun.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And he coached Jordan Addison at Pitt.
There you go.
Wide receivers coach at Hawaii. Obviously a very offensive minded guy. So I think he would
And maybe
be.
with him, maybe if you get a bigger name, you can bring him in as the offensive coordinator.
Yeah. Oh, he was
Because he's
okay.
young.
He was the guy who led the 43-40 win over UNLV. That's the highest, or that's the biggest upset in college football over the last 25 years, right there.
For what? What team was
Howard
it?
beating UNLV. UNLV
Oh,
was
right.
like
Yeah.
a I want to say like 32 and a half point favorite in that game, and Howard won outright 43-40. So I mean, that would be. I like this guy. Just reading about him a little bit, I
Yeah.
think he'd be. I think he'd be really good. I
Yeah.
mean, is he ready to like? Is he at that place where in his career where he'll start to be considered as like a possible head coach? Which I mean, I guess
Maybe,
we'll have
but
to wait and see.
yeah.
Maybe, but maybe he gets an interview. Maybe he wows you.
But it's the same.
I don't think it's bad to go young in college
No,
football.
no, no. Especially after Herm.
So
No.
I would lean, especially with the last two coaches that ASU has had. Maybe it's not a bad idea to
Last
go with
three.
somebody who's a little younger. Last three, yes.
Yeah. And Todd Graham wasn't old, but he wasn't. He was middle aged when he came in, and he did not have a young energy either.
Yeah, no,
like
not
Todd
at all.
Graham, if he could have had his perfect life, he would be like a drill sergeant in World War II or something. I don't know. Like he had the haircut for it.
Yeah, no,
So
that he did have that Sarge haircut.
yeah.
That was my favorite part about him.
um. So, but I mean, Marion's kind of in the same boat as Dillingham. Not like a ton of experience, but you can see the potential in both of them.
Yeah,
One
I feel
guy
like
that I haven't actually seen.
Marion is extremely young. That's the one thing that I think might
Well,
like.
Dillingham's younger than even Marion, but
Is he really?
Dillingham's like 32.
Well, it says right here. Oh, wait, I was reading the wrong name. My bad.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought that it said.
Yeah,
I
Marion's
thought it
32.
said that Marion was a freshman in 2017 on his bio, but I
Oh,
misread the name. So I'm thinking he's
okay.
like 23 years old. I'm like, I don't know, man. This guy's
Yeah, that
pretty
would be
young.
tough.
Yeah,
We
but
do have some
okay,
guys older than
he's
you.
much older than I initially thought he was.
Yeah.
He's obviously extremely accomplished. I think he'd be a great
Um,
candidate too.
yeah. So, and then one guy that I actually haven't seen listed a bunch, but I would like the Ohio State wide receivers coach Brian Hartline. Um,
Ooh,
former Dolphin, had
Dolphin
multiple
legend.
1,000-yard seasons in the NFL, and he is a lights out recruiter. But he might be waiting for something better, which I can't really. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure somebody like Hartline could. I don't know. He could probably hold out for a little bit, become like like a really coveted assistant who has sort of his pick. But
yeah.
that's another good name.
There have been a bunch of other guys bandied about. Look, like it sucks that like this season isn't going to be a good season most likely, but it's fun right now because there's just like there's just speculation of who's it going to be, what are they going to do, and and another thing we haven't touched on really is will Ray Anderson have the final say in the decision? I saw some of his press conference on Sunday, and it seemed like he didn't really give a clear answer on that, which is encouraging to me because I feel like if Ray Anderson did have full control, he would have given a clear answer.
Mm.
He would have said that I'll be making the decision. So that's encouraging to me, I guess. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe we'll end up with. I don't even want to throw an old Eric Mangini as our head coach.
Get Don. What's his name? Wink.
Wink
The guy
Martindale.
from the Giants. Wink
Oh my
Martindale
gosh.
as our head
I'm trying to
coach.
think of like
Vic
NFL
Fangio.
Jeff Fisher.
Oh, that would be a great Herm guy, I think. Vic Fangio.
Big Fangio.
Pete Carroll.
Okay, look, like I actually think Pete could do a good job. That dude has energy still.
Yeah, no, he's young
He
at
does not have a
heart
good
for
offense,
sure. He's forever young.
but so all right. Well, we haven't talked about the Utah game at all. I think we're gonna lose, but I think I think we're gonna lose, but like not. I think it'll be like a game going into the fourth quarter.
Hang on, let's talk about this because they're a 14-point favorite right now, Utah. Do you think what's your pick against the spread at 14 points?
I'll pick Utah.
You're taking Utah minus 14?
Yeah.
See, I kind of want to. 14 seems like a lot when you're looking at the lines. You're like 14, that's a ton. But all that is like
college football
21-3 or something like that, which is pretty. I don't know, man. I'm gonna go with the home underdog. I'm gonna say ASU covers 14.
I say we lose somewhere in the range of like 35-21.
But okay,
it's like 28-21.
I think they could lose like something like 35 to like. Actually, never mind. Yeah, 35-24. That would be covering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they could pull something like that. I think.
And you know what? If they lose 35-24, that most likely means that the game was like competitive most of the way through. You know.
Yeah, if Utah had to score 35 points to like put them away.
Yeah, unless if it starts with, Utah being up 28-0 at halftime, and then it becomes 35-24, then that's obviously bad. But
then we're going to Miller.
Yeah. I'm just hoping for a competitive game, and let's see what Aguano can do. That wraps up episode 12 of the Stomp the Bus podcast. Thanks for following along, and let's hope ASU nails this coaching hire. Go Devils.